Amid rising insecurity and mounting international pressure, an unexpected phone call from Washington sparked a dialogue like no other between two men from seemingly opposite worlds. One, a symbol of global influence and measured diplomacy. The other, a beacon of resolve and African self-determination. What truly unfolded during that hour-long conversation? And why did it make the world pause and listen? The midday sun beat down on the ochre walls of the presidential palace in Ouagadougou, casting sharp shadows across the courtyard. Inside his office, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, transitional president of Burkina Faso, leaned back in his chair, his military uniform crisp despite the heat. At 35, he carried the weight of a nation at war. The morning Security Council meeting had been grueling. Reports from the northern borders painted a bleak picture. Armed groups had overrun several villages, displacing thousands. Families were fleeing with nothing but the clothes on their backs, and the military, stretched thin, struggled to respond. Traoré rubbed his temples, his fatigue a quiet companion to his resolve. Since taking power, he hadn't known a single day without crisis. His uniform, never swapped for a suit, was a deliberate choice, a reminder that he was a soldier first, fighting for a nation under siege. The phone on his desk buzzed, breaking his thoughts. His secretary, Amina Cohn, spoke with a hint of urgency. "Excellency, a call from the American Embassy. Former President Barack Obama wishes to speak with you. They're awaiting your availability to connect the line." Traoré's brow furrowed. Relations with Washington had grown frosty since Burkina Faso severed military ties with France and leaned toward other global partners. This wasn't a call from the current administration, but from Obama himself, a man known for his personal diplomatic outreach. Traoré knew of Obama's reputation. Charismatic, articulate, a leader who could sway a room with quiet conviction. He also knew of Obama's roots, his Kenyan heritage, and his vocal commitment to Africa's future. The request was unexpected, but not entirely surprising. "Tell them I'll take the call in 1 hour," Traoré said, his voice steady. Amina nodded and hurried out, the door clicking shut behind her. Word of the call spread through the palace like a spark on dry grass. A conversation between the young captain and a former American president promised more than diplomatic courtesy. It hinted at a clash of ideas, perhaps even a turning point. Traoré spent the hour alone, not consulting advisors or reviewing notes. He wanted this to be raw, unfiltered, just him and his vision for Burkina Faso. At the appointed time, he returned to his office, a modest space with maps pinned to the walls and a single window overlooking the palace courtyard. The phone rang again, and he picked it up. "Captain Traoré, this is Barack Obama." The voice was exactly as Traoré had imagined. Calm, warm, with a cadence that invited trust. "Thank you for taking my call." "President Obama," Traoré replied in formal French before switching to clear, slightly accented English. "This is an unexpected honor." "I hope you'll allow me to speak plainly," Obama said, from one man to another, beyond the usual protocols. Traoré leaned back, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk. "In West Africa, we value frankness." "I'm listening." Obama began with questions about the security crisis, specific, probing questions that caught Traoré off guard. The former president referenced villages by name, cited recent militant tactics, and mentioned the exact number of displaced families. It was clear he'd done his homework, not relying on vague briefings but on detailed reports. Traoré answered candidly, describing the overstretched military, the lack of equipment, and the human toll of the conflict. The conversation felt less like a diplomatic exchange and more like two men sizing each other up. Then Obama shifted gears. "Captain, I won't pretend to understand every nuance of your situation, but I'm concerned about the pause in democratic institutions in Burkina Faso. History shows that even the best intentions can falter without checks and balances." Traoré's jaw tightened, but he kept his tone even. He'd anticipated this. "With respect, Mr. President, what democracy are you speaking of? The one that left our resources plundered for decades?" the one that failed to protect our people from violence and poverty. He paused, his voice steady but firm. I've fought on the Northern Front. I've seen soldiers die because we lacked basic supplies, while so-called elected leaders hid wealth overseas. Is it the system you'd have me restore? Silence hung on the line, heavy and telling. Traoré had struck a chord, and he knew it. Outside, the sky darkened as clouds gathered over Ouagadougou. A soft patter of rain began against the window, a prelude to the tropical storm brewing. I hear your frustration, Obama said after a moment. I've seen democracy's flaws up close myself, but I've also seen how, over time, it can correct itself. What's the alternative? A military government forever? History suggests that often ends with power serving only a few. Traoré stood and walked to the window. In the courtyard below, soldiers scrambled for cover as the rain intensified, their loyalty to him unwavering despite the hardship. He thought of his childhood in a small Burkina village, where decisions were made under a baobab tree, elders and youth alike sharing their voices. It wasn't Washington's democracy, but it was governance that worked until colonial borders and foreign interests fractured it. Mr. President, Traoré said, his voice softening but resolute, where I grew up, we solved problems together, as a community. Every voice mattered, not just those with money or titles. What I want is a system rooted in that tradition, adapted for today's world, not a copy of your Congress or Parliament. Obama's tone shifted, curiosity replacing caution. Can you elaborate? Our borders, drawn by outsiders, split ethnic groups and sow division, Traoré explained. Our elections must reflect our communities, our history, so every group feels heard. And our economy, our mines, our crops should benefit our people, not foreign companies. Right now, our youth risk their lives crossing oceans for jobs that should exist here. The rain outside grew louder, a steady drumbeat against the palace walls. Obama listened, then responded. I appreciate your candor, but without elections, without a free press, how do your people hold you accountable? How do they know your decisions reflect their will? It was a fair question, and Traoré respected it. Elections will happen, he said, but only after we secure our land and our future. As for the press, they can criticize, but they cannot act as proxies for foreign agendas disguised as journalism. Obama sighed, the sound carrying across continents. Freedom of speech isn't just a Western idea, Captain. It's a human right. So are safety and dignity, Traoré countered. When a mother can't feed her child because of policies imposed from abroad, were her rights? The silence that followed was thick with mutual recognition. Two men, divided by experience and geography, were grappling for common ground. The storm outside raged, mirroring the intensity within the room. Traoré glanced at the maps on his wall, each pin marking a village under threat, a reminder of the stakes. I don't have all the answers, Obama admitted, but I believe any system that concentrates power without oversight risks corruption, no matter how noble the intent. Traoré nodded, though Obama couldn't see it. We agree on that. The question is what oversight looks like here in our context. The call stretched beyond its intended time, aides on both sides likely growing restless. What began as a courtesy had become a debate on governance, history, and the future of a nation. Traoré felt the weight of the moment, not just for himself, but for Burkina Faso. The storm outside the presidential palace in Ouagadougou roared on, its rhythm a counterpoint to the charged silence on the phone line. Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood by the window, watching rain lash the courtyard where soldiers stood resolute under makeshift shelters. The conversation with Barack Obama had already stretched far beyond a diplomatic courtesy, evolving into something raw and uncharted. Traoré felt the weight of every word, knowing this exchange could ripple beyond the walls of his office. Obama's voice broke the silence, measured but earnest. Captain, let me propose something, not as a former president, but as someone who wants to see Africa chart its own course. What if we rethink governance not as a fixed set of institutions, but as a principle, that power must serve the people and be answerable to them. Traoré returned to his desk, a faint smile crossing his face. That's what I've been trying to say, Mr. President. But the world doesn't always listen. They see a soldier in power and call me a dictator, ignoring the failures of the systems they defend. Obama chuckled softly, a sound that carried both warmth and understanding. I know something about labels. Too liberal for some, too cautious for others. The world loves simple narratives, but reality is messy. He paused, then continued. Let's talk specifics. You've mentioned a system rooted in your traditions. What does that look like in practice? Traoré leaned forward, his voice gaining strength. In my village, we gathered under a tree to make decisions. Elders spoke, but so did the young, the women, the farmers. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. I envision a national assembly, not a parliament copied from abroad, but a council where every region, every ethnic group has a voice. Not just the elite in the capital, but the herders in the north, the teachers in the south. We need structures that reflect our reality, not someone else's history. Outside, lightning cracked, illuminating the maps on Traoré's walls, each pin a reminder of the battles raging beyond the city. Obama listened intently, then asked, how do you ensure that council doesn't become a tool for those already in power? In my experience, even the best-intentioned systems can be gamed without clear rules. Traoré nodded, respecting the question's weight. That's why we need checks rooted in our culture. In our villages, no one ruled alone. Decisions were debated openly, and leaders who strayed were called to account under that tree. I'm not against oversight. I'm against models that don't fit us. For example, our colonial borders split communities, creating conflict. Our elections must redraw those lines, not in geography, but in representation, so every group feels seen. Obama's tone was thoughtful. That's a powerful vision, but it's ambitious. Rebuilding a system from the ground up takes time, trust, and resources. How do you convince your people to believe in it, especially when they're facing daily threats? Traoré's gaze drifted to a faded photo on his desk, a grainy image of his family in their village, standing under that same tree. By showing them we're listening, he said, not just promising change, but inviting them to shape it. I've already started regional forums where people can speak, farmers, students, elders. Their ideas will build this system, not mine alone. The former president seemed intrigued. That sounds like grassroots democracy, Captain, but it needs transparency to work. Without a free press, without open debate, how do you prove you're listening? Traoré's jaw tightened briefly, but he kept his composure. The press is free to question me, but not to spread lies that serve foreign interests. We've seen so-called journalists fuel division with stories paid for by outsiders. Freedom comes with responsibility, especially in a nation fighting for survival. Obama pushed back gently. I get your concern about foreign influence, but stifling criticism risks alienating the very people you're trying to unite. Transparency isn't just about letting people speak. It's about letting them see the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. The rain began to ease, a soft drizzle replacing the torrent. Traoré considered Obama's words, recognizing the truth in them. You're right that trust requires openness, he said. But trust also requires security. When our borders are safe, when our children aren't dying, then we can afford broader debates. Until then, every step must protect our sovereignty. Obama's voice softened, a hint of respect threading through it. I understand the need to prioritize stability. But consider this. The clearer your plan, the more your people and the world will rally behind you. A timeline for elections, even a flexible one, could show your commitment to shared power. Traoré scribbled a note, his pen scratching against the paper. A timeline, he repeated, testing the idea. Not a rigid one, but a roadmap. Something that shows we're moving toward inclusion, not control. I can work with that, but it must be on our terms. The conversation shifted to practicalities. Obama proposed a partnership. Not official, not governmental, but through his foundation. We could support projects in education, healthcare, agriculture, areas where Burkina Faso can build strength without compromising independence. No strings attached, just collaboration. Traoré weighed the offer carefully. International support was tempting, but he'd seen too many partnerships turn into traps. Your offer is generous, he said, but it must be transparent. No secret deals, no hidden agendas. Our people need to trust that any help strengthens us, not binds us. Absolutely, Obama replied. Transparency is the foundation of trust. I'd propose sending a small team to Ouagadougou, not diplomats, but experts in development. They'd work with your team to identify needs, share ideas, and respect your leadership. Traoré nodded slowly, the idea taking root. I'd welcome that, but on one condition: every step is public. Our people must see what's being discussed, what's being built. Trust is fragile here, and I won't risk it. Agreed, Obama said. Let's make transparency our cornerstone. The call stretched on, the storm outside now a faint drizzle, leaving the air heavy with the scent of wet earth. Traoré glanced out the window, the courtyard now bathed in soft light as the clouds parted. He felt a shift, not just in the weather, but in the conversation. For the first time, he sensed a genuine partner in Obama, not a lecturer or an outsider with an agenda. Before the call ended, Obama posed a question that caught Traoré off guard. Captain, when you're alone with your thoughts, what's your dream for Burkina Faso a decade from now? Traoré paused, his eyes tracing the horizon beyond Ouagadougou's rooftops. I see a nation where a child in a remote village has the same opportunities as one in the city, he said quietly. A country that grows its own food, builds its own future, not exporting raw materials for others to profit. A place where decisions are made together, like under the tree of my childhood, but with the tools of today. A nation respected not for its strength, but for its integrity. Obama's voice carried a note of admiration. That's a vision worth fighting for, and I believe you can make it real if you let your people help carry it. Traoré's lips curved into a rare smile. That's the plan, Mr. President. But it only works if the world respects our right to stumble, to find our own path. No interference, only support, Obama said. That's my commitment. The line went quiet, not with tension, but with understanding. Two men, worlds apart, had found a shared language. Not a power, but a possibility. As Traoré set the phone down, the palace felt different, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the weight of the moment. The phone call ended, but its echoes lingered in the presidential palace in Ouagadougou. Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat at his desk, the silence of the room broken only by the distant hum of the city recovering from the storm. The conversation with Barack Obama had lasted far longer than planned, stretching into a profound exchange that left Traoré both energized and contemplative. Outside, the clouds had parted, and a golden shaft of sunlight spilled across the marble floor, illuminating the maps and faded family photos on his shelves. He felt a shift, not just in the atmosphere, but in his own resolve. The world might not understand his vision yet, but for the first time, someone had listened. Traoré's thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Amina Cohn, his secretary, entered, her expression a mix of curiosity and urgency. Excellency, the advisors are asking about the call. Words spreading outside the palace, too. People are talking. Let them talk, Traoré said, his voice calm but firm. But we need to act. Call in 3 advisors, only the ones we trust most. We have work to do tonight. Amina nodded and left to summon the team. Traoré turned to the window, gazing at Ouagadougou's skyline, its crowded neighborhoods, vibrant markets, and universities pulsing with restless energy. The conversation with Obama had clarified something vital. Leadership wasn't just about conviction. It was about communication. If Burkina Faso was to forge its own path, its story needed to be told clearly, boldly, and to its own people first. Within the hour, 3 advisors arrived. Lieutenant Colonel Moussa Diallo, a trusted military strategist. Dr. Fatimata Zongo, an economist with a fierce commitment to local development. and Issa Compare, a former teacher who had become Traoré's liaison to rural communities. They gathered around a simple wooden table, the maps on the walls casting long shadows in the lamplight. The call with Obama, Traoré began, wasn't just a courtesy. It was a challenge to articulate our vision, not just to the world, but to ourselves. He leaned forward, his hands clasped. We've talked about a new system, one rooted in our traditions but built for today. Now I need to make it real. Dr. Zongo spoke first, her voice steady. The people are tired of promises, excellency. They want to see action, jobs, schools, safety. How do we show them this isn't just another plan that fades away? Traoré nodded, appreciating her directness. We start with them. Not decrees from this palace, but forums where they speak. Obama suggested a timeline, a roadmap, to show we're moving toward inclusion. I agree, but it must be ours, built from the ground up, not imposed from above. Lieutenant Colonel Diallo, his brow furrowed, added, the security situation complicates this. We're fighting on multiple fronts. If we divert resources to forums or elections, we risk losing ground to the militants. That's why security comes first, Traoré said. But we can't wait for perfect peace to build trust. The people need to see we're fighting for them, not just with guns, but with ideas. Issa, you've been to the villages. What do they want most? Issa Compare, his weathered face reflecting years of listening to rural voices, spoke slowly. They want to be heard. In the north, they talk about schools for their children. In the south, they want markets that pay fair prices for their crops. Everywhere, they want leaders who don't forget them once they reach the capital. Traoré's eyes lit up. Then, that's where we start. A national dialogue. Not a parliament. Not yet. But an assembly where every region sends representatives. Elders, youth, women, farmers. They'll shape the rules for how we govern. Dr. Zongo scribbled notes, her pen moving quickly. We could pilot this in a few regions first. Test the structure, see what works. But we'll need resources to organize, and the people need to trust it's not just for show. Transparency, Traoré said, echoing Obama's words. Every meeting, every decision will be public. Radio broadcasts, community reports, even printed summaries for villages without electricity. No secrets. The advisors exchanged glances, sensing the shift in Traoré's approach. This wasn't the soldier who had seized power in a moment of crisis. This was a leader beginning to weave a broader vision. They spent hours drafting an outline for a National Civic Dialogue Assembly, a body that would include voices from all 13 regions, designed to review major decisions and propose reforms. It wasn't a Western parliament, but a modern adaptation of the village tree gatherings Traoré had described to Obama. As midnight approached, Traoré stood. This isn't just a plan, it's a promise. We'll publish it in French, more, and Fulfulde, so every Burkinabe can read it. And we'll start with a speech. Not here, but at the University of Ouagadougou. The students deserve to hear it first. The advisors nodded, energized by the clarity of the path ahead. As they left, Traoré stayed behind, staring at the photo of his family under the village tree. He thought of Obama's final question, what he dreamed for Burkina Faso. The answer hadn't changed, but now he saw the first steps to make it real. The next morning, Traoré arrived at the university's open amphitheater, a dusty space packed with students, professors, and curious onlookers. The air was thick with anticipation, word of the Obama call having spread through markets and radio stations. Traoré, still in his military uniform, stepped to the microphone, his voice steady but warm. You deserve a country built with your voices, not just your votes, he began. For too long, leaders have spoken for you, not with you. Today, we start something new, a National Civic Dialogue Assembly, where every region, every community will shape our future. This isn't my plan, it's ours. The crowd listened intently as he outlined the assembly. Representatives from every region, open forums broadcast on radio, and a commitment to transparency. He didn't mention Obama directly, but the influence was clear, a call for accountability tempered by Burkina Faso's own context. When he finished, the amphitheater erupted in applause, not out of obligation, but from a shared sense of possibility. Across the Atlantic, Obama sat in his foundation's Washington office, drafting a private memo to his team. He described Traoré as a leader caught in the crucible of history, not a revolutionary icon or a tyrant, but a man trying to balance conviction with pragmatism. If governance is to mean anything, he wrote, it must adapt to context. Our role isn't to dictate, but to support principles, participation, accountability, dignity, and let local solutions emerge. He instructed his team to prepare a small delegation of development experts to visit Ouagadougou, emphasizing transparency and respect for Burkina Faso's sovereignty. The foundation would focus on practical support, teacher training, agricultural cooperatives, rural clinics, projects that aligned with Traoré's vision without overstepping. Back in Ouagadougou, the publication of the National Civic Dialogue Assembly plan sparked a wave of reactions. Radio stations buzzed with debates, some praising the inclusivity, others questioning its feasibility in a nation at war. In a village near Dori, a group of women gathered to discuss whether their voices would truly be heard. In Bobo de Lasso, a cafe hummed with students arguing over the assembly structure, excited by the idea of a system that felt like theirs. The international response was mixed but engaged. A European embassy issued a cautious statement, noting the unconventional approach. An African Union representative praised the emphasis on regional representation. The United Nations opened a channel for dialogue, intrigued by the grassroots framework. But within Burkina Faso, something deeper was stirring. For the first time in years, people who had felt ignored, farmers, teachers, youth began to believe their voices might matter. Traoré, back in his office, received a call from Amina Cohn. Excellency, the first regional forum in the Center Nord is scheduled for next week. They're asking if you'll attend. Tell them I'll be there, Traoré said, not to speak, but to listen. As he hung up, he looked out at Ouagadougou, its rooftops gleaming under the now clear sky. The conversation with Obama hadn't changed his vision, but it had sharpened it, reminding him that leadership required not just strength, but connection. The seed of change had been planted, and now it was time to nurture it. The sun rose over Ouagadougou, casting a warm glow across the city's bustling markets and quiet neighborhoods. Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood at the edge of a dusty field in the Center Nord region, where the first regional forum of the National Civic Dialogue Assembly was underway. A large tent sheltered dozens of representatives, farmers, teachers, elders, and students, who had traveled from villages and towns across the region. Their voices, passionate and varied, filled the air as they debated education, land rights, and security. Traoré, still in his military uniform, sat among them, not at a podium but on a simple wooden chair, listening intently. His presence was a statement. This was their process, not his alone. The forum was the first of many planned across Burkina Faso's 13 regions, a tangible step toward the vision Traoré had shared with Barack Obama. The conversation with the former president had been a catalyst, not for changing Traoré's goals, but for clarifying how to communicate them. As he listened to a young woman from a northern village demand better schools, he felt a quiet pride. This was what he'd meant by a system rooted in the people, a modern echo of the village tree gatherings of his childhood. Back in Ouagadougou, the palace buzzed with activity. Amina Cohn, Traoré's secretary, coordinated reports from the forum, ensuring every discussion was recorded and broadcast on national radio. Excellency, she said, entering his office later that week, the response to the Center Nord Forum is spreading. People in other regions are asking when their turn will come. Good, Traoré replied, studying a map marked with the locations of upcoming forums. Let's keep the momentum. Every region must feel this is theirs. And make sure the summaries are printed and sent to villages without radio access. Amina hesitated, then added, there's also news from Washington. The Obama Foundation has confirmed their team's visit next month. They've shared a proposal, teacher training programs, and agricultural cooperatives, all transparent, as you requested. Traoré nodded, his expression guarded but open. Review it carefully. If it respects our terms, no hidden agendas, no control, then we'll move forward. Our people need partners, not overseers. The weeks that followed saw a flurry of activity. The National Civic Dialogue Assembly began to take shape, with each region selecting representatives through community gatherings. The process wasn't flawless. Some villages argued over who should speak for them, and security threats in the north delayed a few forums. But the transparency Traoré insisted on kept skepticism at bay. Radio broadcasts carried voices from every corner of the country, and printed summaries reached even the most remote areas. In a market in Bobo Dioulasso, a farmer told a reporter, "For the first time, I feel like someone in the capital cares what I think." In a Dori classroom, a teacher read the assembly's outline to her students, sparking debates about what fairness in governance could mean. Across the Atlantic, Obama's foundation moved forward with its commitment. The delegation arrived in Ouagadougou, not diplomats in suits, but educators and agricultural experts who met with local leaders in open forums. They listened as much as they spoke, earning cautious trust. The Foundation's first project, a pilot program for training rural teachers, was launched in partnership with Burkina Faso's Education Ministry, with every step documented publicly. Traoré attended the launch, shaking hands with the team and emphasizing, "This is a collaboration, not a directive. Our future is ours to build." The international community watched closely. An African Union report praised the Assembly's inclusive approach, calling it a potential model for other nations in transition. A European think tank noted its unorthodox but promising structure, while the United Nations offered technical support for the constitutional referendum Traoré had proposed as the Assembly's culmination. But the real impact was felt within Burkina Faso. In a village near Tankadogo, an elder stood at a forum and asked, "Will women have equal say in this assembly?" The facilitator, trained by Traoré's team, responded, "Not just equal, essential." The crowd cheered, and the moment was broadcast nationwide. Not everyone was convinced. Some urban elites in Ouagadougou grumbled that the assembly favored rural voices too heavily. Others, hardened by years of broken promises, doubted it would last. Traoré addressed these concerns in a rare radio address, his voice steady but inviting. "This is not perfection," he said. "It's a beginning. If we stumble, we'll rise together. But we'll do it on our terms, with our wisdom." The dialogue with Obama continued indirectly. The former president sent a personal letter, congratulating Traoré on the forum's early success and offering insights from his own experience with community organizing. "Power works best when it's shared," he wrote. "Keep listening, and your people will carry you further than any army." Traoré kept the letter private but shared its sentiment with his advisors, who were now drafting a phase plan for the constitutional referendum. The plan included rural consultations, sectoral forums, and a timeline for elections, not borrowed from foreign models, but shaped by the Assembly's recommendations. One evening, as Traoré reviewed the draft in his office, Dr. Fatimata Zongo knocked and entered. "Excellency, the economic proposal from the forums are coming in. Farmers want local processing plant for their crops, not just raw exports. It's ambitious, but it could reshape our economy." Traoré leaned back, a spark of excitement in his eyes. "That's the heart of it, building here for us. Work with ISA to prioritize those ideas. If we can show one plant working, it'll prove more than 100 speeches." Lieutenant Colonel Moussa Diallo, joining the meeting, added a note of caution. "Security is improving, but we're not out of the woods. The Northern Front needs more resources if we're to hold these forums safely." "Then we allocate them," Traoré said. "But we don't pause the dialogue. The people's trust is our strongest defense." As months passed, the National Civic Dialogue Assembly became a living institution. It wasn't a parliament, but a space where Burkinabe from all walks of life, herders, artisans, students, voiced their hopes and fears. In one forum, a young man suggested mobile clinics to reach remote villages, an idea that was quickly adopted. In another, a group of women proposed a cooperative to process shea butter locally, sparking a pilot project funded partly by the Obama Foundation. Each success, however small, built momentum. Traoré's speech at the University of Ouagadougou had been a turning point, but it was the quiet moments that defined the change. In a cafe in Ouagadougou, a group of returning migrants debated the assembly's potential, one saying, "This is the first time a leader has asked us to challenge him." In a northern village, a radio broadcast of a forum prompted a community to organize its own meeting, sending ideas to the capital. The seed planted by Traoré's vision, watered by the dialogue with Obama, was beginning to sprout. 1 year after the call, Traoré stood on a hill overlooking Ouagadougou, the city's lights twinkling below. The National Civic Dialogue Assembly had completed its first round of forums, and a draft constitution was taking shape, woven from thousands of voices. It wasn't perfect, security challenges persisted, and some regions demanded faster progress, but it was theirs. Traoré thought back to Obama's question. What did he envision for Burkina Faso? The answer was clearer now, a nation where every child, from village to city, had a chance, where resources built local wealth, not foreign profit, where governance was a conversation, not a command. In Washington, Obama read a report from his foundation's team, detailing the teacher training program's success and the growing network of agricultural cooperatives. He smiled, recognizing the slow, steady work of change. In a speech at a global development conference, he spoke of Burkina Faso without naming Traoré directly. Progress doesn't always look like a ballot box, he said. Sometimes it's a tent in a field where people speak and leaders listen. That's where the future begins. For Traoré, the journey was far from over. The constitutional referendum loomed, and with it, the challenge of balancing security, inclusion, and international expectations. But as he looked out over Ouagadougou, he felt a quiet certainty. The conversation with Obama had been a mirror, reflecting his own convictions back to him, and a window showing the world what Burkina Faso could become. Above all, it had been a seed, not yet a tree, but firmly planted in Burkinabe soil, nurtured by the voices of its people.